The XY Advisor podcast is intended for professional financial advisors. All discussion is limited to publicly available information and should not be interpreted as legal, professional, or financial advice. XY Advisor does not hold an AFS license nor provide any financial services. Before making investment decisions, you should obtain financial advice from a qualified financial advisor.
Ben Nash here. I'm a co-founder at XY Advisor and founder of financial advice business Pivot Wealth. My business baby I started from scratch a bit over 6 years ago. In that time, I've leveraged some of the learnings of the XY community to scale the business and become one of the better known financial advice businesses for high income accumulators. You can join me each Tuesday as I have the privilege of interviewing some amazing people where I'll selfishly be able to continue my personal journey to improve every aspect of my advice process, and hopefully you can learn a few things on the journey as well. Jump over to xyadvisor.com if you haven't signed up already to share and learn from other advisors, or simply download the app.
Dash was formed in April 2022 following a merger with financial planning software firm Raw Software, wealth platform software specialist Neo, and platform technology provider Wealth02. Dash is the first advice technology company to focus on solving problems across the end-to-end advice process. Dash helps. Dash's modular approach allows advisors to tailor their best-of-breed tech stack, helping streamline processes and leaving advisors time to focus on maintaining their clients' experience.
Hey guys, Ben Nash from the XY Advisor team, and today I'm pumped to be here with Rebecca Pritchard. Rebecca is a senior financial planner at Rising Tide Financial down in Melbourne. Just had a great chat on the pod with Maddie Hale from that group as well, and keen to pick Beck's brain about her advice journey, some of the things that she's learned from focusing on younger clients and the lessons learned. Rebecca, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Look, I know that you're sort of, got quite a profile in the industry, regularly listed on the FS Power 50, etc. But for anyone that hasn't heard of you, can you maybe give us a short version of your advice journey and how you've ended up where you are today?
Yeah, definitely. So I think I've got a great background in advice. So I started as a client. I got advice when I was 23, I think it was 22, 23, with my then boyfriend, now husband. And I was working in corporate finance at the time. And I knew that wasn't my forever job, but I wasn't sure what was next for me. And through the advice process, was able to articulate my values, my goals, and identify that I loved advice. I loved going through it. I was like the most obsessive client you've ever seen. And eventually, within a couple of years, I retrained from corporate finance into personal finance and called up my advisor and said, can you create a job for me? So then transitioned into that role. So I was in a small self-licensed business for sort of 5-ish years, and then went through another transition, similar time to starting a family as well, where I joined the Rising Tide practice, and have been there for just over 3 years now.
Was that where you were a client of Wealth Enhancers? Is that where you started?
Yeah.
I feel like Wealth Enhancers are responsible for a few new entrants into advice. Obviously, they're doing a lot of things right over there. I know Jess Brady, one of the hosts of the XY podcast, was a client of theirs. That sparked a passion for her in financial advice, ended up becoming a financial advisor. So, it's awesome to see. I wonder how many more they can take credit for.
Yeah, it was a great breeding ground, and I think it really shaped how I think about advice and has made me a fundamentally better advisor because I live and breathe this myself personally, as well as practicing it with clients.
Absolutely, and it's certainly relatability for clients. Like I know that we hired one of our clients as a relationship manager in the business, and her speaking from personal experience to people that were considering getting financial advice was a huge help because she could talk about all of the ins and outs. And I think that as advisors, sometimes you can get a bit blinded to the things that you deal with day in and day out. Having that different perspective can be super valuable for someone going on that journey as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you were at Wealth Enhancers. You were there for like 5 years, kicked a whole bunch of goals there. Then we merged with Rising Tide. Can you talk us through like how you went about establishing yourself in an established business in Rising Tide and finding your feet there?
Yeah, well, it was sort of two-step process. So I actually joined Rising Tide and with just a clean break. So I had to start from scratch in terms of establishing my client base there. I had a 4.5-month-old baby. I was coming back from maternity leave, and it was really daunting. Also, 2 weeks into starting that job, we went into our first lockdown back in 2020. So that was
Nice.
just a whole lot going on back then. It was really hard to go from being really successful in a previous practice to starting from square one and feel like you're failing, because you're also trying to talk a different language from a different licensee and different systems and just learning a slightly different way of doing advice. So it was daunting and overwhelming a lot of the time, but I also felt incredibly supported by Matt and the team at Rising Tide of, we also brought you in here because we don't want you to do things exactly the way we do things. And we'll back you in to sort of break a few things and find your feet as you go. I don't think, no one anticipated that we were all going to be doing that remotely. We sort of thought we would be belly to belly a bit along that way. So I suspect that did drag some of that transition out a bit. But, for me, I certainly having the confidence in building that up in the previous organisation, like I knew I could do it here. And it was just a matter of just putting one foot in front of the other and know that like in time you will deliver what you want to.
And how did you balance that? Because I imagine it would be hard enough making that transition under when you're just in regular career mode, but with you coming off the back of mat leave with 4.5-month-old bub, how did you tackle that and how did you find balance?
Yeah, it was pretty brutal. Like, I was working 3 days a week. I was taking, 2 expressing breaks during the day as well as lunch breaks to, make sure I could keep breastfeeding. It was really hard to find a rhythm. It took me a little while, probably a good couple of months before I accepted that was the rhythm and that it was just vastly different to what I expected it and what I had in a previous life. And so there was definitely some adjustments of my expectations. It was managing expectations of the business as well, but then also having faith that, again, once time rolls out, like it will wash out. And Matt and the team, like they hired me when I was like 100 weeks pregnant. So everyone knew what we were getting into to some degree. And so we were all playing the long game. It was probably a little bit clunkier than we had hoped at the start. And to be fair as well, 5 months into joining Rising Tide, I had to tell Matt I was pregnant again. So, but again, that was sort of a strategic career decision to, bunch the kids up so that then we could get that done and crack on.
Chaos is the new normal, I think, in that sort of
I always say go down in a blaze of glory.
That's it. Yep. My wife and I had ours pretty close together, and it's intense, but it does get you through that period in a slightly shorter amount of time. So.
I feel like I'm largely on the other side of it now. So I came back to work October of last year after my daughter was born, and so sort of was that 15 months ago, and like it's actually a really great rhythm now, and I'm really happy with that sequencing decision as much as you can control it. Not you can't always do it that way. But I also was a lot kinder on myself in terms of expectations this time around.
Yeah, it's a little bit easier when you have some sort of idea as to what to expect. Exactly.
Yeah.
Beck, what does an average client look like for you, and where do they come from?
I'm really pleased that most of my clients are referrals, and so that's incredibly rewarding. So my average client would be a mid-30s professional woman or a early to mid-30s couple who are either have young children or are thinking about starting a family. You probably laugh and be like, that's just you looking in the mirror, Rebecca. But yeah, that's exactly who I love to work with. And it's really great and to be talking about that stuff every day when you're going through it every day as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of advisors you work with people like you can relate to their challenges, the opportunities, you can learn sort of going through the same things yourself. Yeah, absolutely. And I know that you do a lot of work with, equity and superannuation. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. It's something that I'm incredibly passionate about because, we know that there is a gender pay gap. We know that there is a gender superannuation gap. And, I think I'm incredibly privileged to be actually in a position to do something about that. And so I love having conversations with my clients to actually address, I guess moving away from the anchoring of, the traditional woman or mum takes 12 months off parental leave, dad takes 1 to 2 weeks off. No one talks about superannuation, mum works part-time, and then we compound the implications of that for the next 20, 30 years. So having more active conversations with clients to address that parental leave period, making sure it's based off what people actually want. But then also looking at the superannuation side of things to make sure that women, because it is overarchingly women, are not financially penalised for the pretty incredible and substantial role of carrying, birthing, and caring for children. It's been fascinating actually in the last couple of years that I haven't had a single man or partner, dad, say, oh, no, I don't like that idea. Everyone actually jumps at it going, oh, I didn't know that was an option. Like when you look at something like contribution splitting, but they're like, oh, that's fantastic. That's like, let's do that. And they're so excited that there is an avenue that they can use that balances the scale and they're pumped at it.
Totally. Yeah. I know some of the stats out there are pretty scary around some of those gaps and shortfalls, but particularly for women. I have to admit, and I said this to you offline as well, that we tend to not do a lot of contribution splitting. And I had the thought around that, in the event of a relationship breakdown, that typically assets are divided, as per whatever the court's decision is or whatever the agreement is around that, with superannuation included as one of those assets that's part of the pie. What are some of the things that people may not have thought about, though, around the practical implications there?
From a really practical or an execution perspective, we see that simply doesn't actually happen when it comes to superannuation in reality. So the division of assets tends to be often anchored around the family home. And again, if you've got a woman who has a primary caring responsibility, that tends to be lumped in together. But I also I think that's logical when you start to explore it. But I also like to unpack the couple of really behavioral or emotional components of this as well, around the value of that people have of financial security when they log in or they check in their superannuation account, and just simply seeing that there is money there. Because again, let's hope that no one actually does get divorced, even though we know that is simply not the case. So particularly when you've got, let alone people who are working part-time, but you've got people who aren't in the workforce or aren't in the paid workforce at all, to see that there's still funds going into their superannuation account provides an enormous amount of financial security. It also validates the role that they're playing in their household, which is twofold. It gives them that sense of value, but it also illustrates to the working partner that they are performing a role that is incredibly valuable. I mean, you could easily expand this conversation into talking about the underinsurance of women or homemakers in Australia and not adequately quantifying the value of that role. Absolutely,
yeah. And I think we know a lot about the intangible benefits of financial advice for that peace of mind and confidence, but I know I'm certainly guilty of not always applying it in that, with that particular lens. So I think that makes a ton of sense.
Well, even if I may just build on that a little bit further, one of the I guess, conversations, the spirited conversations that we've had even at Rising Tide is, potentially around like tax deductions of additional contributions, and how it makes sense often to be putting it in the higher income earner's name because you get a bigger tax deduction, which absolutely makes sense. But then potentially a strategy like contribution splitting can give you the benefit of that tax deduction, but then the equity at the end of the day. Or even sometimes tax deductions aren't the be all and end all. Like, do we just place less of an emphasis on that and more of an emphasis on the feeling of security and the feeling of equity?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think we apply that with saving strategies, and sometimes, like I know for us, we talk about with clients, sometimes it's obviously it's optimal to have all of your money in an offset account, but sometimes having all your money in one big pile doesn't give you the same benefits of motivation of seeing your savings growing or the clarity on, where your spending is coming from and those sorts of things. So I think that absolutely translates, and the motivation psychology piece we know feeds into then better results and more over time and better habits and those sorts of things. So yeah, I think it's certainly something that I'm going to reconsider off the back of this chat. So no doubt there'll be a few.
That's a win for today.
Totally. Beck, what have been, you've been at it for a while, what have been some of the biggest shifts in what you do or how you do it as an advisor?
I've loved sort of seeing, hearing, watching how commonplace like goals and values-led advice is now. I feel like when I came into the industry, the way that we were operating felt a little bit woo-woo, and the sort of like a bit of the black sheep of the family, and so I love if you think about the benefit for the Australian community, I love how common that is now. I love that like there's genuine competition and a thriving marketplace for advice. I know that the number of advisors is dwindling, but I think good advice businesses are flourishing.
Totally.
And that I think is really, really encouraging. I think one of the challenges to sort of look a little bit further down the track is fueling like the talent pipeline, the draft coming through out of universities, and even something as simple as like my pathway. I'd done my commerce degree. I decided I was going to change careers. I did my RG 146 of a night time whilst working full time, and then I walked straight into a job. Like that pathway doesn't exist anymore. And there's a whole lot of positive that have come from the changes of education standards, but I am conscious of making sure the hurdles are not too high to encourage people to take creative pathways into the industry as well as the more conventional, coming up from university or straight out of school.
Yeah, totally. It definitely does place some restrictions, particularly for career changes. Like I know we've been growing and hiring through the last few years and spoken to a few people, and they come from, sort of broadly aligned, maybe somewhere in finance or someone senior in another career path, and looking at coming to the industry, they're bringing a lot of skills that would allow them to become an advisor, reasonably quickly from understanding the technicals, understanding the client management side, and then doing that delivery. But when you look at, well, what do they need to do to then, meet the current standards, which overall I think are great. But it does become difficult. And then also from a REM perspective, like anyone that's more established, you got commitments and things that you need to deal with. So it does add another dimension to figuring out how you can make it work. And I think we're fortunate that we're probably as a business, we're a little bit more built for that than some others that I'm aware of. And I know that there's a lot out there that are, but there's also a lot of businesses that really aren't. Like they're not, they don't have the internal sort of capabilities or the growth that's allowing them to bring in people, get them the exposure without sort of pigeonholing them into a admin role or a CSO role for an extended period of time. So it's definitely something that needs to be addressed. So I'm quite sort of heartened by seeing some of the changes, the things that are coming out there. I know that Tal have got a thing around this. I know at XY we've been talking a lot about this and the pathways and how do we get more people in there, because there's a definite gap. As you say, good advice businesses are flourishing. People are wanting more advice. We're also seeing more advisors for younger people. There's more people, like growing cohort of people that are getting advice or looking for advice. Quality of advice is increasing, so that sort of feeds the beast even more. You got more demand, so it's definitely something that we need to address to make sure that we can deliver. Good to see some positive things there, but I think there's probably still a little bit more work to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think the technology side of things is always encouraging as well. I don't think it ever moves as fast as you think it's going to.
No.
But I certainly can reflect on what things look like 8 years ago or 10 years ago compared to today, and at least I know we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Beck, you've mentioned a few things already, but what have been some of the biggest challenges for you on your advice journey?
Most recently, like switching licensees or going from self-license to license was a challenge that I did not give appropriate emphasis to beforehand. I felt like I had to learn a different language. I'm really pleased that I am fluent in that new language now, or close to, but that was probably more of a time and an energy investment than I was expecting. I think I'm a reasonably confident person, which has served me very well through a few transitions, and that sort of is, I guess, internally encouraged through the adversity. But I also recognize, the people that I work with on my client base have been somewhat sheltered from like some of the large financial like market events. Probably the closest I've come is in the last 6 months of seeing clients under stress with rising interest rates, because historically, like, market movements hasn't really bothered my clients because they're investing for years and years down the track. Whereas, this shifting interest rates and the sense of uncertainty is a completely different equation. Because again, like, I guess the cohort of people I work with got through the pandemic reasonably unscathed as well, if not were able to save and accelerate. So this, I'm enjoying the challenge, and I guess it helps as well to be personally experiencing it. I've got a mortgage as well to go, okay, what does this look like? I just got off a call with a client this morning who told me that it was simply impossible to get a grocery shop below $240 a week. Below $300 a week for a family of four. And like, it's funny how often financial planning comes down to conversations about groceries and meal planning.
I think there's definitely
having conversations about that. It's like, all right, like, let's roll up the sleeves. Like, let's talk about this. What are we eating this week?
Yeah, it's funny when you end up in conversations like that, and it's like, it seems like it's a world away from markets and technical financial advice, but these are the things that do.
That's what's on people's mind.
The dial, yeah, exactly. And I think you like me, like I've been registered for a bit over 10 years. Through the last 10 years, it's like we've just seen interest rates going down and like massive run up in equities markets, and not seen inflation and not seen these sorts of pressures. And I think you're working with younger clients like we are as well, that a lot of them haven't seen it either. They're just starting to sort of hit their straps from a wealth building perspective, taking on more financial commitments, and now it is sort of changing the game. So, like you, it's a new challenge, I think, for a lot of younger advisors to be dealing with.
Yeah, and specifically dealing with a lot of young families as well. Like, it's at a time where you're financially the most vulnerable because you've got probably the highest expenses if you've got kids in childcare, and possibly someone not working or working less than full time. And I'm really grateful for the coaching and education I've had in both Rising Tide and at We to help people work through their values and articulate what's important, because we're making trade-offs today that we just didn't think we were going to have to make. And it's been really interesting, actually, for the first couple of months where we were seeing interest rates rise, and clients were far more inclined to reduce their savings or investments than they were to actually change their behaviour. Whereas, you fast forward another few months, and either they've got no more room to move with the savings or investments, or they're realizing the flow and implications of doing that for too long. And again, like this generation, like we've lived a pretty good life. We think about during pandemic times, it's like, well, that's where you got your really fancy takeaway because you couldn't go to the restaurant. Okay. And so actually going, well, maybe we can only get 2 punnets of strawberries this week instead of 3, or like where are we prepared to make trade-offs? And it's like it's just a different type of fitness or different muscle that we haven't got a fitness or a strength in yet. But the more we flex it, the more we train it, I know that we will.
That's right. Yeah. And things will get easier again. It's like when you work with the client and they might either run into something unexpected financially or run up a bunch of debt that they need to deal with. Sometimes flexing that muscle and getting used to, spending less or making your money work means that when you do get into a stronger position, it makes everything else a lot easier. You can take your foot off the pedal a bit, but still, be doing more to build and actually grow. So
I think at a social level, I think this is actually really healthy for the community. I completely appreciate there is a lot of people who are under genuine financial stress at the moment. So I'm not talking about those people, but for those who are, have had high discretionary income to learn how to develop this sort of strength or this sort of fitness will be a great, thing to carry into the future.
Absolutely. Beck, I could chat about this all day, but I won't. My last question for you is that if you could wind back the clock to your bright-eyed, bushy-tailed self coming into advice and do one thing differently, what would it be?
Oh, I don't know. I feel pretty pleased with how I've gotten to this point. I probably would encourage myself to just keep doing what I'm doing. I think about perhaps things like social media or publishing content or articles. And I remember listening to Gary Vee like a number of years ago of just telling people to get out of their own way. Like everyone's super self-conscious at the start. And I reckon I probably wasted or spun my wheels for a couple of years just being too nervous or self-conscious to take action there. And I think about the value that being social and being sort of loud in financial health and wellness has served me, as well as serving the community and people who consume the content that I create. It'd be nice to know that I hadn't pissed away a couple of years fretting. But yeah, so that'd probably be the one thing, just to like encourage myself to like get out of my own way and just do things as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think it is sort of part of the journey. Like obviously I do a lot of content as well. And I know at the early days, I still remember Phil Thompson, who was big on video, one of the first younger advisors that I saw that was really crushing it in that space and doing, he was kind enough to lend a hand and went down to his office down in Melbourne, and like I had all these things scripted out, and it was like literally recording stuff sentence by sentence and then spending hours chopping things together, and it still looked atrocious. But soon enough you come to realize that you want to be who you are, and it probably doesn't matter if you stuff the odd thing up or you mince your words a little bit. That sometimes that's probably a better thing because people can see that you're people, and then that makes them actually connect more than some awesome robot that's like spouting off whatever it is. But yeah, I think it's definitely good advice to just lean into that journey sooner and get there, and obviously it has an impact as well.
In your initial video, were you wearing like a muscle tank top, or were you in a shirt?
I think I feel like wearing,
my dress code has changed over the years as I've gotten more confident in my own skin.
Totally, yeah. Ironed and pressed. Probably had the good the good shirt with buttons on it as well. I don't think I own too many of those these days, and have been known to do a little TikTok from the beach in my bucket hat. So. Yeah, I think it's funny how much emphasis you place on things, and then you come to realize that they're probably not as important
Or they might actually be detracting from what you're trying to say.
Absolutely. Beck, thank you so much for sharing your insights. It's great to see, great to see you kicking those goals, and look forward to watching on from the sidelines.
Thanks for the support, and loved having the chat today.